you've spent your life trying to be someone likable, successful, acceptable. But deep down, a quiet voice keeps asking, who am I really? In this video, we'll explore why that question haunts you and why you've never truly been able to answer it. We'll journey deep into the psyche, into the masks you wear, the shadow you've hidden, and the forgotten self buried beneath it all. If you've ever felt lost, empty, or like you're living someone else's life, this may be the awakening your soul has been waiting for. Why you don't know who you are is not a riddle of intelligence, but a mystery of the soul. It is not that you are unaware, but that you have been taught to look in the wrong direction outward. From the moment you took your first breath, the world began shaping you, sculpting your identity with words, not your own expectations, not your own dreams that were never truly born from within you. And so, you began to forget. Not in a conscious way, but in the slow erosion of silence, in the daily compromises, in the smiles that hide screams, and the nods that betray your truth. You became a stranger to yourself, playing roles in a theater of illusions, believing that the face in the mirror is the whole story. But beneath that reflection, something ancient stirs, something buried, something waiting. The self, and the true self, does not live in your thoughts or your achievements. It is not your resume, your reputation, or your routine. It does not rise and fall with applause or criticism. The self is not interested in masks. And yet, for most of your life, you've worn one. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask you crafted to survive in a world that demanded performance over presence. It was useful, even necessary. Without it, you would not have learned to navigate society, to speak the language of acceptance. But in that adaptation, something sacred was sacrificed: authenticity. The more you identified with the persona, the more distant you became from what is real within you. You began to believe that you are what others see, but there is more. Far more. The reason you don't know who you are is because you have not dared to descend. Beneath the surface of your personality lies a vast subterranean world, the unconscious. Not a void, but a hidden kingdom, a place of dreams, instincts, symbols, wounds, and forgotten truths. It is here that the shadow waits, and the shadow is not evil. It is not a villain. It is everything you have denied, everything you have repressed, everything you have buried, because someone once told you it was unacceptable. Your anger, your lust, your envy, your wildness, your fear, but also your creativity, your sensitivity, your truth. What you have refused to see has not disappeared. It has gone underground, and there in darkness it has grown powerful. The shadow is the guardian of your authenticity. It will not allow you to live in falsehood without consequence. When you ignore it, it appears in your projections, in your triggers, in the people you despise. Without knowing why, it speaks through your compulsions, your addictions, your self-sabotage. It whispers in your darkest nights, this is not who you are. And yet you keep running afraid that if you face what is hidden, you will be consumed. But here is the paradox. It is not the shadow that devours you, but your resistance to it. When you turn toward it, with courage, with compassion, it becomes your teacher, your mirror, your guide. This journey inward is not for the faint of heart. It is not a weekend retreat or a checklist of spiritual hacks. It is the hero's journey, but not the kind told in action movies. This is the inner odyssey, the descent into the underworld, the confrontation with the dragon inside. Every myth, every ancient tale speaks of this path, the path where the protagonist must leave the known world, face trials, enter the cave and emerge transformed. Jung understood this myth was not just a story. It was a psychological truth. You are the hero, and the dragon you fear is your own unconscious. But you are not alone in this inner wilderness. There are forces within you that long to help the archetypes. Universal patterns that exist in all of us, guiding our inner development. The wise old man, the great mother, the trickster, the lover, the warrior, the child. These are not just ideas. They are living symbols pulsing through your psyche. They appear in dreams, in fantasies, in moments of profound emotion. When ignored, they distort. When integrated, they empower. To find who you are, you must ask, which archetypes have I lived through? Which have I denied? Have I always tried to be the strong one while suppressing my inner child's need to feel? Have I been the caretaker, the people pleaser, never allowing the warrior in me to rise? Have I only shown my light while exiling my wild feminine or my chaotic masculine into the shadows? The soul is not interested in perfection. It seeks wholeness, and wholeness means integration, not the elimination of darkness, but the marriage of opposites, the union of conscious and unconscious, the reconciliation of light and shadow, masculine and feminine, chaos and order. This is the path of individuation, not becoming someone else, not becoming better in the eyes of the world, but becoming who you already are. At the deepest level, the self, not the ego, not the image, but the center of your being. And to walk this path, you must be willing to lose the life you thought you wanted to find the life that is truly yours. This is why most people never find themselves, not because they lack potential, but because they are afraid to question, afraid to unlearn, afraid to suffer. But suffering, when embraced consciously, becomes the crucible of transformation. The wound is the womb. What breaks you also opens you. The shattered illusions become the doorway to the real. And in the rubble of the false self, something luminous can emerge. Something sacred, something sovereign. The soul does not shout, it waits, it watches. And when you are finally silent beneath the noise, the roles, the striving, it speaks. It does not say, be successful. It says, be real. It does not say, fit in. It says, wake up. And once you hear that voice, even once you can never fully go back, the mask begins to itch, the lies begin to burn, and the question, who am I, really becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes a fire, a hunger, a longing that refuses to be silenced. How to find the self beneath the mask. You were never just the face you learned to wear. From the very beginning, long before you had words to describe yourself, the world began whispering who you should be. And like a sculptor shaping wet clay, it molded you with rewards and punishments, praise and rejection, approval and shame. Slowly, layer by layer, you constructed a mask, a smile here, a silence there, a behavior polished to please. And before you knew it, the mask hardened no longer, just a tool but a prison. You wear it so well now that even you believe it's you. But late at night, when the noise fades, there's a faint pulse beneath the surface, a quiet ache, a sense that something essential is missing. That ache is the self waiting to be remembered, for the self is not a performance, not a role, not a costume stitched from the expectations of others. The self is wild, ancient, and sovereign, and if you want to find it, you must be willing to burn the mask. This is not a metaphorical fire, it is a crucible. The path to the true self begins with destruction, and the destruction of illusions, of personas, of false allegiances. Carl Jung called this confrontation individuation, be it the process by which a person becomes whole, by facing all that they are, not just the parts that are easy to love. It is not about becoming someone new, but about becoming what you already are beneath the camouflage. And to begin, you must enter the darkened corridors of your unconscious, that vast and hidden landscape, where the parts you've buried still live. The child who was told to be quiet, the rebel who was punished for disobedience, the artist who was mocked for dreaming. These fragments have not vanished. They have retreated to the underworld of your psyche, forming the shadow, the rejected, denied, and repressed parts of you that now knock on the door of your consciousness, disguised as anxiety, depression, rage, addiction, envy, self-doubt. The more you ignore them, the louder they become. The mask you wear, what Jung called the persona, was not born from your soul. It was built for survival. It helped you belong. It made you acceptable in school, at work, in relationships, in society. It taught you when to nod and when to bite your tongue. It protected you, yes, but it also required you to betray yourself. Every time you laughed when you wanted to cry. Every time you said yes when you meant no. Every time you pretended to be okay. Just to keep the peace. The persona kept you safe, but at a cost. Because what is safety if it suffocates your spirit? What is belonging if it demands the death of your authenticity? There comes a moment for those who dare to wake up when the mask begins to crack. The smile feels fake. The job feels hollow. The applause feels meaningless. And something within you starts whispering, "This is not who I am." To find the self beneath the mask, you must go where the ego fears to tread into the depths of your unconscious. Jung saw the unconscious not as a trash bin for discarded thoughts, but as a living reality, a symbolic realm, a mythic sea filled with archetypes, dreams, instincts, and gods. The unconscious is not beneath you. It is around you, inside you, above you. It speaks in symbols and synchronicities, and gut feelings and nightmares that won't let you go. And at the center of this psychic ocean lies the greatest treasure of all, the self. Not the self you think you are. Not your ego, but the totality of your being. Your inner divinity, your original blueprint. And the only way to reach it is through the shadow. Do not misunderstand, the shadow is not your enemy. It is your forgotten twin, your wounded brother, your silenced sister. It holds not only your darkness, but your brilliance. Your lost passions, your forbidden truths, your raw creativity, your authentic voice. But you must earn its trust. And that means facing the parts of yourself you've been taught to fear. Your jealousy, your rage, your shame, your sexuality, your sadness, your emptiness. They are not poison. They are portals, each one a mirror, each one a key. You cannot selectively numb the psyche. What you push down pushes back. What you resist persists. The shadow will haunt your relationships, your decisions, your health, until you turn to face it and say, "I see you. I will no longer look away." And when you do, the mask begins to loosen. You start to speak more honestly. You start to say no without guilt. You start to cry without shame. You start to laugh in places you used to stay silent. And something shifts. You don't become someone else. You return to the you before you were edited. Before you were made to conform. Before the world carved away your mystery. The self begins to emerge not as a performance, but as a presence. And with it comes a quiet power. Not arrogance, not domination, but the unshakable sense that you are rooted in something eternal. You are no longer acting, you are being. But the journey does not end there. For within the psyche dwell deeper forces still, the archetypes. These are not just stories. They are structures, living patterns that shape your desires, your fears, your path, the hero, the lover, the sage, the orphan, the king, the rebel, the mother. These archetypes are not invented. They are inherited. They rise from the collective unconscious and find expression in your choices, your dreams, your wounds. To find the self beneath the mask, you must learn which archetypes have claimed you and which you've abandoned. Have you lived only as the warrior, always fighting, never allowing yourself to rest? Have you exiled the mystic within you, or the one who longs for silence and truth? Have you silenced the rebel who dares to question? These energies live within you still, and they must be brought back into balance. Your dreams are not meaningless. They are messages, symbols from the unconscious, calling you home. The house you keep visiting, the child who keeps crying, the staircase that never ends, the animal that chases you. All of it is you trying to wake you up. The psyche does not speak in sentences, it speaks in symbols. To know yourself, you must learn this forgotten language because the self does not shout it, whispers through intuition, through pattern, through pain. It waits behind the mask, behind the role, behind the fear. Waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to remember. And when you do, the world changes, not because the outer world shifts, but because you do. You begin to see the divine in the mundane. You begin to feel alive in moments of silence. You begin to make choices that come not from guilt or fear, but from alignment. You stop asking, what do they want me to be? And start asking, what is true for me? You begin to live not as a reaction, but as a revelation. You begin to embody the self. And that is the most revolutionary act of all. The shadow you were taught to fear. There is a part of you that you have buried so deeply you've forgotten it was ever alive. A part you were taught to hide, to shame, to silence. Not because it was evil, but because it was powerful and the shadow. You were warned about it in whispers and punishments. You learned that certain emotions were unacceptable, that some thoughts were dangerous, that pieces of your soul were too wild, too raw, too much, and so you split. You edited yourself. You amputated your truth to become acceptable. And what could not be accepted was cast into the darkness. But what is buried does not die, it waits, it watches. It grows in silence, becoming the very thing you fear. Not because it is a monster, but because it has been forced to live in chains. The shadow you were taught to fear is not your enemy. It is your twin, and it is the key to your wholeness. The world does not teach you how to meet yourself. It teaches you how to perform. From childhood, you are praised for being obedient, polite, composed. You are punished for being loud, angry, impulsive, vulnerable. The message is clear. Love is conditional. And to be safe, you must become someone you are not. Slowly, you learn to repress the parts of yourself that feel unsafe. Rage becomes silence. Sadness becomes a smile. Desire becomes shame. And beneath the surface, the shadow forms a psychic graveyard of everything you've disowned. You think you've moved on, but it haunts your steps. The shadow does not disappear when ignored. It takes the reins in secret. It shapes your habits, your relationships, your reactions. It becomes the whisper behind your self-sabotage, the ghost in your addictions, the stranger in your mirror. Carl Jung did not see the shadow as a demon to be exorcised, but as the doorway to the self, to the totality of your being. He warned that what we do not bring into consciousness will appear in our lives as fate. You will think you are unlucky in love, but it is your unloved shadow choosing your partners. You will believe you are plagued by anxiety, but it is your repressed fear knocking for recognition. You will blame the world for your unhappiness, but it is your abandoned inner world revolting against its own erasure. The shadow speaks always, if not in your voice, then in your suffering. To confront the shadow is to commit a holy act of reclamation. It is to descend into the underworld of your psyche, like Orpheus seeking Eurydice, and retrieve what was once lost. It is to sit with your shame and ask it what it needs. It is to look into the eyes of your rage and ask what injustice it remembers. It is to unearth the skeletons of your past and give them names. Stories, dignity. This is not comfortable work. It is not glamorous. It is the raw labor of the soul. But until you do it, you will be a fractured being. Smiling on the surface, haunted beneath wholeness, requires confrontation. It requires discomfort. It requires love. Not for who you wish you were, but for who you are in total. Many people never do this work. They build their lives around avoiding themselves. They hide behind perfectionism, behind productivity, behind spiritual bypassing. They claim they are healed because they have forgiven, but they have not yet raged. They claim they are at peace, but they are merely numb. They wear masks so well. They forget there is a face beneath, but the soul remembers. It aches. It calls through the cracks in the facade. Through the insomnia, through the addictions, through the inexplicable sadness. The shadow is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to wake you up. There is gold in the darkness. That is the paradox. The shadow is not just made of wounds, it is made of power. Creativity, intuition, sensuality, boundaries, instinct. Everything you were told was too much still lives in that sacred cavern. And when you begin to integrate the shadow, when you reclaim what was lost, you become dangerous. Not to others, but to the illusions that have ruled you. You speak with truth, no longer filtered through fear. You say no without explanation. You cry without apology. You laugh without permission. You begin to live not as a polished persona, but as a sovereign soul. And yet, the shadow has many layers. It is not only the personal, it is the ancestral, the cultural, the collective. It carries the weight of generations, the trauma that was never named, the grief that was never grieved, the silence that became tradition. Jung knew this. He saw the shadow not just in the individual, but in the world in war, in hatred and ideology. What humanity refuses to face within itself, it projects onto others. That is why this work matters. It is not just personal healing, it is archetypal alchemy. To integrate the shadow is to break a spell cast over your bloodline, to end a war that has raged in your unconscious for decades, to choose wholeness over habit, truth over comfort, love over suppression. And when you do this, something ancient shifts. Your dreams change. Your energy changes. You no longer chase validation. You embody presence. You no longer run from discomfort. You meet it like a guide. You see the child within you, wild, sacred, and still alive. And you offer them what they were once denied: protection, expression, reverence. You see others not as threats or mirrors to avoid, but as invitations to deeper self-knowledge. You begin to live as a whole, being fierce in your boundaries, soft in your spirit, rooted in your truth. But the path is not linear. The shadow returns again and again, asking to be seen anew. Just when you think you've faced it all, it reveals a deeper layer, a new memory, a forgotten grief, a repressed desire. And this too is grace. For the self is not static. It is a spiral, always unfolding, always revealing more of what you truly are. To live consciously is not to eliminate the shadow, but to dance with it, to learn its rhythm, to understand its language, to stop fearing the darkness and instead light a candle and sit with it. You were not born to be half of yourself. You were not born to be a performance. You were born to be whole. And that means facing what is hidden, not to destroy it, but to embrace it, not to conquer it, but to listen. Because beneath the rage is grief. Beneath the grief is love. Beneath the love is truth. And beneath it all, waiting patiently, is the self unbroken, unashamed, and more powerful than you've ever known. The truth about your inner voice. There is a voice inside you that you have been taught to ignore. Not because it is wrong, but because it is dangerous to the life you were conditioned to live. It is the voice you hear in moments of stillness, in the spaces between thought and action, in the long silences when nothing makes sense. It is not loud, it is not urgent. It does not command, it whispers, it waits. And yet, its presence is undeniable. It speaks in symbols, in moods, in dreams that won't let you go. This voice does not belong to your ego, your ambition, your fears, or your social mask. It comes from deeper waters, from the unconscious, from the forgotten depths of your being. You were not taught to listen to it. You were taught to override it with logic, to dismiss it with reason, to label it irrational, emotional, primitive. But that voice, that subtle knowing presence, is the guide you've been searching for, the one that never left, the one that sees through the lies you tell yourself to survive. And the truth is this: until you learn to listen to it, your life will not be your own. The inner voice is not the voice of your programming. It is not the internalized judgment of your parents, your peers, your teachers, or the society that raised you. That is the voice of the superego, the borrowed conscience, the inherited critic, loud, moralistic, demanding. But beneath that tyrant lies something sacred. Jung called it the self. Not the ego, but the center of your psyche. The source, the origin, the totality. And the self speaks in the voice you forgot how to hear. It does not argue with the world. It does not shout over your distractions. It waits in your dreams, in your gut instincts, in the ache you feel when you're living a lie. And though it may be drowned out for years, it never forgets its song. You hear it when you wake up at 3 a.m. and feel like your life doesn't fit anymore. You hear it when you're surrounded by people and still feel utterly alone. You hear it when you're chasing something you thought you wanted: success, validation, love, and suddenly feel nothing but emptiness. These are not signs of failure. They are messages, echoes from the self, saying this is not your path. This is not your truth. You have wandered too far from home. But because the ego hates uncertainty, you turn the volume back up, you numb, you distract, you tell yourself you're fine. And yet the voice returns, not as a shout, but as a weight in your chest, a fog you can't shake, a sadness without a name. That is the language of the soul when it has been silenced too long. The reason we fear the inner voice is because it threatens the identity we've built. If we listen to it, we might have to change. We might have to leave things behind. Jobs, relationships, beliefs, masks. And that is terrifying to the ego, which clings to what is known, even when it hurts. But the self is not interested in comfort. It is interested in wholeness. It is interested in truth. It will let your life fall apart if that is what it takes to wake you up. Because the soul does not bargain. It does not compromise. It calls you toward integration, toward becoming what you are not, what you were trained to be. To follow the inner voice is to enter the unknown. It is the first step of the hero's journey, the refusal of the call, followed by the plunge into the depths. And those depths are your unconscious, that vast, invisible ocean, where your forgotten memories, your repressed emotions, your ancestral stories, your dreams, and your archetypes dwell. It is there in that darkness that the voice becomes clearest. Not because the unconscious is orderly or logical, but because it is real. The self lives in that symbolic realm. It guides through images, not instructions, through patterns, not plans, through intuition, not intellect. And the moment you begin to honor it, truly honor it. Your life begins to shift, dreams become messages, synchronicities increase. You begin to feel watched over, not by an outside force, but by the part of you that never forgot. The inner voice becomes a compass, and it always points in one direction toward wholeness. But wholeness requires a descent into the shadow, into the anima or animus, into the neglected dimensions of your being. The inner voice will lead you where your ego does not want to go. It will tell you to confront what you've hidden, to forgive what you swore you never would, to reclaim the parts of you you once banished in order to survive. You may think you are afraid of failure, but what you are truly afraid of is being seen. The inner voice demands nakedness, vulnerability, radical honesty. It calls you not to become better, but to become real. And that requires letting go of the polished image, the curated self, the need to be understood. It asks you to walk away from the applause and into the silence, into the forest, into the unknown terrain of your psyche, where the monsters you buried are waiting. And yet those monsters, your shadow, your rage, your grief, your fear, are not there to destroy you. They are guardians, initiators. Each one has something to teach you. Each one holds a part of the voice you've lost. To find your inner voice, you must first clear the noise of social media, the noise of comparison, the noise of perfectionism and productivity and endless distraction. You must dare to be still, to sit in the silence and listen. Really listen to what rises. At first, you will hear the static on the critic, the voice that says, you're not enough, that you're too late, that you're too much. That is not your voice. That is programming. Let it pass deeper. Still, something older waits. It does not speak in shoulds or shouldn'ts. It speaks in truth, in knowing. And when it speaks, you will know it not because it feels safe, but because it feels like home. This is not a path for everyone. Many will live and die without ever hearing their true voice. They will mistake the loudest voice in their head for the truest. They will live according to borrowed beliefs and second-hand dreams. They will play roles written by others and wonder why they feel like ghosts in their own lives. But if you are willing to listen deeply, fiercely, without flinching, then the self will meet you, not all at once, not with fireworks, but with a steady, unshakable presence. A sense that you are finally living your life, not someone else's, that you are no longer chasing purpose, but embodying it. The truth about your inner voice is that it has never abandoned you. You abandoned it because the world taught you to, but it remained patiently, faithfully waiting beneath the surface. And now it asks you to return, to remember to rebuild the bridge between your conscious mind and the soul that has always known the way. How to break free from who you're not. You were not born as a label, a role, or a title. You were not born to be a projection of someone else's dream. You came into this world, whole, unnamed, untamed, untouched by expectation, a spark of raw being. And yet, almost instantly, the shaping began. Before you could walk, and they told you how to behave. Before you could speak, they taught you what was acceptable. And before you could even understand who you were, the world began whispering who you should be. So you became what was praised. You hid what was punished. You adjusted to survive. You dimmed to fit in. You crafted a self that wasn't truly you, but was good enough to be loved, accepted, and approved of. And so began the forgetting, not a forgetting of facts or memories, but a forgetting of essence, of your soul's signature, of your inner voice, of your birthright to be whole. To break free from who you're not is not rebellion. It is resurrection. You do not escape the false self by running faster. You do not free yourself by improving the mask. You break free by descending into the soul, into the shadow, into the dark vault of your psyche, where everything disowned, rejected, and repressed still lives. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey of becoming what you truly are, by integrating what you have denied, and it is not gentle. It is not clean. It is a psychological alchemy, one that requires the death of illusion, the disintegration of the persona, the dismantling of everything you built to please the world at the cost of your authenticity. The persona, Jung said, is the mask we wear to meet society. It is a social adaptation, a compromise between who we are and who we are expected to be. It helps us function, but if we identify with it, we become a ghost, an actor in a role we didn't write, repeating lines we didn't choose, wondering why we feel so empty at the core. And the core longs to be known. Not managed, not fixed, not branded known. Beneath the layers of conditioning, the self waits, not the ego. Not the curated self, but the self, the totality of your being conscious and unconscious. Light and shadow. Divine and human, the self is not interested in performance. It is not concerned with how well you play your part. It wants you back. It wants the you that existed before you became a character in someone else's play. And to return, you must be willing to confront the structures that have kept you imprisoned, not outer walls, but inner beliefs. I must be perfect to be loved. I must be strong to be safe. I must hide my truth to belong. These are not truths. They are survival strategies born in moments of fear, and they became the architecture of your false self. But the architecture is crumbling. You feel it in the restlessness, in the hollowness behind the smile, in the way your dreams feel distant, like they belong to someone else. The life you've built may look beautiful from the outside, but your soul knows when it's starving. You cannot nourish your truth with superficial success. You cannot silence the call of your depths with distraction. The real you is buried, but not dead. It sends signals through anxiety, through existential dread, through the strange sense that no matter what you achieve, something essential is missing, that something is not out there. It's in here. It's what you abandoned in exchange for acceptance. And now it's time to reclaim it. The journey inward is not romantic. It is raw. It is a descent like Inanna into the underworld, like Dante into the inferno, like every hero in every myth who must enter the darkness to reclaim their soul. You must face the shadow of the parts of you you've tried to forget, the anger you repressed, the shame you buried, the needs you denied. These are not your enemies. They are parts of your soul wrapped in wounds. They are energies that became distorted only because they were unloved. Jung taught that we do not become whole by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow, when integrated, becomes strength. It becomes clarity. It becomes the force that helps you say, "This is who I am, and I will no longer apologize for it." To break free from who you're not is to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop betraying yourself in the name of peace. Peace is not compliance. Peace is alignment. And alignment requires truth, not the polished truth, the real one. The truth that shakes you, the truth that liberates you. You begin to speak differently, to walk differently. You no longer chase validation because you no longer live in exile from yourself. You belong to your own soul again. You become fierce in your boundaries, compassionate in your presence, grounded in your being. This is not a change, it is a return. But even deeper still beneath the shadow, there is a sacred polarity within your psyche. The anima and the animus, the inner feminine and inner masculine. the two great forces that live within all of us, regardless of gender. For men, the anima is the key to feeling, intuition, creativity, soul. For women, the animus is the inner logos, the voice of reason, courage, and structure. When these inner figures are repressed, they become distorted. The man becomes emotionally barren, addicted to conquest. The woman becomes rigid, aggressive, disconnected from feeling. But when these inner opposites are integrated, the psyche becomes whole. The heart and mind work together. Action is guided by intuition. Feeling is grounded in wisdom. This union is the sacred marriage, the inner alchemy that gives birth to the self. And the self is not an idea, it is an experience, a knowing, a homecoming. It is not perfection, it is totality. It is when all parts of you, even the ones you were told to fear, sit at the same table. It is when you no longer need to hide. When you realize that your darkness is not a defect, but a depth, that your wounds are not weaknesses, but windows, that your truth, however inconvenient, is the most sacred thing you own. You stop negotiating with the world about your worth, you stop shrinking to fit in, you expand, you root, you remember? Because the truth is, you were never broken, you were only buried under layers of performance, under the weight of should and must and be good. But the wild part of you never died. It waited. It waited for the moment you would crack, not to collapse, but to awaken. And that moment is now. The false self is no longer sustainable. The mask is slipping, and behind it is a face you haven't seen in years, your own. Not the self others demanded, the one that was always there, whispering, waiting, wild and holy and whole. You are not the person you think you are. You are not the person you think you are. The image you hold in your mind, the story you repeat to yourself, the name you've been answering to all your life. These are fragments, rolls, shadows on the cave wall. They are the echoes of what others needed you to be. You have spent years building an identity brick by brick, shaped by the hands of family, culture, trauma, reward, and fear. But identity is not essence. Identity is armor, and beneath the armor, beneath the masks and adaptations, there is something else. Something older than your name, something that does not shift when the world changes, something you forgot not because it was untrue, but because it was too wild, too sacred, too alive, to survive the cages you were forced to inhabit. Carl Jung called it the self, the totality of your being, the divine core, buried under layers of compromise. And to find it, to remember it, you must be willing to lose who you think you are. The ego is a necessary fiction. It allows you to function, to orient yourself in the world. But the tragedy begins when you mistake the map for the territory. When you confuse the ego with the self, you say, "This is who I am." But what you really mean is, "This is who I've become in order to be safe." The ego is built on defense. It is the child's shield. And if your early years taught you that love is conditional, the truth is dangerous, that vulnerability leads to pain, then your ego learned to survive by constructing a version of you that was acceptable, pleasing, efficient. But what was left behind in that construction? What did you exile to preserve connection? Your anger, your joy, your intuition, your magic. That abandoned material did not disappear. It sank into the unconscious, becoming what Jung called the shadow. Not evil, not wrong, but unseen. And the longer it stays hidden, the more it controls you. The person you think you are is a compromise. It is a deal made between your soul and your survival instinct. But the soul does not forget, It will not remain silent. It will whisper through dreams, through longing, through inexplicable pain. It will call you to deeper waters. To return to the self, you must face what you abandoned. The shadow must be met, not rejected, not suppressed, but met with courage and curiosity. The shadow is the gatekeeper to authenticity. It contains all the pieces of you that were deemed unacceptable too. Emotional, too intense. Too sensitive, too weird. But these are not flaws. They are your power, twisted by rejection into symptoms. Anxiety is truth denied. Depression is passion buried. Rage is boundary violated. The shadow does not lie. It reveals in its own symbolic and often chaotic language everything you need to reclaim, to become whole. The journey into the shadow is not a descent into darkness for its own sake. It is the mythic descent, the archetypal underworld journey. Like Orpheus, like Persephone, like every hero who must go down to rise. Jung taught that individuation and the process of becoming who you truly are requires a confrontation with the unconscious, not a casual glance, but a deep immersion, a willingness to feel what you've avoided, to remember what you forgot, to unlearn what was never yours. The shadow is not a singular thing. It is a shifting mirror, a living landscape, an inner realm of lost stories and wounded gods. You do not conquer it. You integrate it. You walk into it with open eyes and trembling hands and say, I am ready to remember who I am. And the remembering begins in symbols, in dreams, in archetypes. The psyche does not speak in linear language. It speaks in myth. It shows you the child crying in the attic, the monster chasing you through hallways, the locked door you can't open. These are not random images. They are encoded truths. They are messages from the self, filtered through the unconscious, calling you back to the sacred path. Every night, your dreams carry whispers from the forgotten parts of you. Every synchronicity, every irrational pull, every pattern that keeps repeating. These are not mistakes. They are clues. You are not lost. You are being summoned. The self is not a goal. It is not a better version of your ego. It is the original blueprint, the uncarved stone beneath the sculpture. And it wants wholeness, not perfection. That means integration, not erasure. To find it, you must marry opposites, the masculine and the feminine, the light and the dark, the persona and the shadow, the wounded child and the sovereign adult. Jung called this inner union the sacred marriage, the conjunctio. It is the moment when the fragmented parts of you stop competing and start conversing, when the war within becomes a dialogue. When you no longer need to choose between being real and being loved, because you have learned to love what is real. This inner union includes your anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine forces within your psyche. Whether you are man or woman, these energies live within you. The anima is the muse, the soul, the intuitive feeling, creative dimension. The animus is the logos, the structure, the clarity, the strength. When unintegrated, they distort. The anima becomes seduction or hysteria. The animus becomes tyranny or cold logic. But when honored, they become guides. They restore balance. They lead you to the self, who is both and neither transcendent whole and beyond all binary. You are not the person you think you are, because who you think you are has been shaped by forgetting, shaped by fear, shaped by the necessity to survive in a world that does not honor the soul. But you are not here to survive. You are here to return, to rise from the ruins of false identity and embody the truth your soul never stopped whispering. This is the task of a lifetime. It is not a straight line. It is a spiral deepening with each turn, undoing layer after layer of illusion. And there will be moments of grief. You will mourn the years spent performing. You will ache for the time lost to pretending. But you will also begin to feel something else. Something fierce, something ancient, something alive. You will feel yourself, not the role, not the reputation, not the projection, but the self-radiant, grounded, terrifying in its raw beauty. And you will realize that the person you thought you were was never strong enough to carry the weight of your soul. But the person you are becoming is. The path ahead is not easy, but it is sacred, because every step you take toward your truth, you take on behalf of the world. A healed individual is not isolated. They are a beacon, a myth reborn, a soul on fire. You are not the person you think you are. You are so much more. You are what you've been afraid to become. You are what the world told you was too much. You are what the unconscious has always known, waiting like a flame beneath the ashes. The journey is not to create yourself, but to uncover, remember, and become what you already are. And that is the greatest act of liberation you will ever know. The mask you wear is killing you. There is a mask you wear so well, you've forgotten it was ever a disguise. A mask sculpted not from your soul, but from your survival piece by piece. You built it with. Every time you silenced your truth to be accepted. Every time you pretended to be fine when you were breaking. Every time you became who they wanted just to feel worthy of love. It is the smile that doesn't reach your eyes, the laughter that feels hollow, the confidence that trembles in the dark. You wear this mask to belong, to be safe, to succeed. But the cost of safety is always the same. Self-abandonment. And the mask, though beautiful on the outside, is suffocating your essence. It is killing the part of you that is real, the part of you that longs to breathe, to cry, to scream, to live without explanation. You were not born to wear a persona. You were born to become a self. And the self cannot breathe through a mask. Carl Jung called the mask the persona, a necessary adaptation, a social interface that allows you to function in the world. It is not evil. It is not false in the way a lie is false. It is selective, curated. It is the version of you that you present to the world, shaped by culture, family, and fear. But over time, the persona becomes a prison. You forget that it is only one part of you. You mistake it for the whole, and that mistake fractures your being. The deeper truth is this: you cannot live a full life from a partial self. The persona is safe, it is liked, it is rewarded, but it is not whole. And anything that is not whole will eventually collapse under the weight of its own emptiness. You feel this collapse in subtle ways, the fatigue that won't go away, the longing that has no name, the way success feels hollow and relationships feel shallow. You smile in photos, but your soul isn't in the frame. You speak, but your voice doesn't feel like yours. You perform intimacy while your heart stands at a distance. This is not depression, it is disconnection. Disconnection from the self, disconnection from the wild, luminous, unedited being. You were before the world told you who to become. And the more you wear the mask, the more the real you disappears into shadow. Jung warned that what we failed to bring into consciousness returns as fate. The mask may win you approval, but it will also ensure that you are never truly seen. And what is love? What is life? If it never touches the core of who you really are, the mask kills you. Not with violence, but with slow erosion. It numbs your joy. It silences your intuition. It reduces your soul to a brand, a role, a resume. It rewards performance and punishes presence. You begin to measure yourself by how well you fulfill expectations rather than how deeply you embody truth. You say what others want to hear. You become who they want to love. And in doing so, you betray the one person whose approval you actually need, your own. The self, the inner compass. The divine center of your psyche grows quieter each time you override it to maintain the persona. But it never leaves. It watches, it waits. It speaks through the ache in your chest and the dreams that haunt you. It sends symbols, patterns, synchronicities. It whispers through the fatigue of pretending. This is not who you are. To hear that whisper, you must risk removing the mask. Not all at once, but gently, honestly. You must begin to notice when you are performing, when you are people-pleasing, when you are filtering your truth to be palatable. Ask yourself, who am I beneath the roles? What do I feel when no one is watching? What do I want that I've never said out loud? These questions are dangerous because they awaken what you've buried, but they are also holy because they lead you back to the self. And the self does not live in performance. It lives in presence. It does not shout over the world's noise. It sings beneath it. And the journey to return to it is not about becoming better. It is about becoming whole. This is the work of individuation, Jung's term for the path toward inner wholeness. It is the process of integrating all parts of the psyche, the persona, the shadow, the anima or animus, the wounded child, the wise elder. It is the sacred unraveling of everything you were told to be, so you can remember what you truly are. And it begins by turning inward, by facing the shadow. The shadow is not a villain. It is everything you've hidden behind the mask. Your rage, your grief, your fear, your joy, your power. The pieces of you that didn't fit the image you were trained to project. They were not destroyed. They were exiled. But now they knock on the door of your awareness, disguised as symptoms, anxiety, depression, addiction, self-doubt. These are not problems to be fixed. They are signals, alarms, invitations. They are the voice of your disowned self crying out to be remembered. And when you begin to face them, when you listen not with judgment, but with compassion, the mask begins to fall, and beneath it, the soul begins to breathe. This is the turning point. The moment you realize that you no longer want to be admired, you want to be known. You no longer want to impress, you want to connect. You no longer want to perform, you want to feel. And this is terrifying because it means shedding the identity that once kept you safe. But it is also liberating because it means coming home. To walk this path is not to reject the world, but to return to it more whole. It is not to destroy the persona, but to stop worshiping it, to let it serve the self, not silence it. And as you walk deeper, you will encounter the anima or animus, the inner feminine or masculine that completes the psyche. The anima in men is the soul image, the source of feeling, creativity, intuition. The animus in women is the inner voice of reason, courage, action. When these inner figures are repressed, they distort. But when integrated, they lead to inner harmony. They become bridges connecting the conscious to the unconscious, the known to the unknown. They guide you through your dreams, your relationships, your art. They help you balance softness with strength, logic with mystery. Doing with being, and through them, you become whole. To wear a mask is to live in fragments. To remove it is to reclaim your face, not the one shaped by fear, but the one formed by truth. You will not lose yourself. You will lose the idea of yourself that was never real. And what emerges in its place is not a better version of you. It is the true you. Raw, unfiltered, radiant. The one you were before the world told you to shrink. The one who does not need approval to exist. The one who walks into the world with their soul in their hands, saying, "This is who I am," Not perfect, not polished, but whole. And that is the beginning of freedom. The persona versus the true self. You are not who you pretend to be. But you've worn the mask so long, it clings to your skin like a second face etched into your muscles, fused to your voice. This is not deception. In the ordinary sense, not lying to others with malice, but something deeper, something existential. A slow abandonment of the true self in exchange for belonging. Safety survival. You began wearing the mask long before you knew what masks were. It formed in classrooms, at dinner tables, in the subtle glances of disappointment or pride. It was stitched together by every be good, every don't cry, every you should be more like. And over time, that carefully constructed image, the one that smiled when you were grieving, and the one that agreed when you were enraged, the one that pleased when you were dying to scream, became your public self. Carl Jung called it the persona, the personality you wear to meet the world, a necessary fiction. But like all fictions, it demands distance from the truth. And the longer you live inside it, the further you drift from the center of your being. You begin to forget that it was ever a performance. You forget there's a backstage. And in that, forgetting something sacred begins to die. The persona is praised. It is rewarded. It is socially necessary. You cannot navigate the world without some form of it, a professional face, a polite voice, a presentable image. But the danger begins when you believe that the persona is you, that the reflection others love is all there is, because what the persona hides, what it must suppress to maintain its image, is the full depth of your humanity. It hides the rage, the sorrow, the confusion, the wildness, the strangeness, the brilliance that doesn't fit into polite conversation. It hides your darkness and your light. It hides the self, not the ego, not the image, but the totality of your being. And the self does not tolerate suppression forever. It sends signals: depression, anxiety, numbness, insomnia, existential longing. These are not mental malfunctions. They are the cries of a soul, buried alive beneath the weight of performance. You feel it, don't you? That quiet voice that whispers when the world gets quiet, that ache that no accomplishment soothes, that sense that even when everything looks right, something still feels wrong. That is the self knocking, not to destroy your persona, but to awaken you from its spell. The self is not a better version of you. It is the real you, the one that existed before you were shaped, before you were taught, before you became an actor in someone else's play. It is the source of your intuition, your creativity, your compassion, your inner fire. And it cannot be accessed through effort. It reveals itself when you begin to unmask, to drop the performance, to speak feel, choose from a place that does not care about approval, to risk being misunderstood in exchange for being true. This is the call to individuation, the journey Jung placed at the heart of psychological and spiritual transformation. Individuation is not about fixing yourself. It's about integrating yourself, not cutting off the parts that don't fit your image, but reclaiming them. The rejected child, the raging rebel, the silent seer, the grieving lover. They are all pieces of your wholeness. They live in the unconscious, waiting for your courage. Because to embrace the self, you must descend into what you've denied. The persona avoids pain, but the self is forged in it. You cannot find your truth without facing your shadow. And the shadow is vast. It holds the shame you were taught to carry, the truths you were punished for speaking, the emotions you weren't allowed to feel, the desires you repressed to be good, lovable, successful. The shadow is not evil. It is exiled and everything you exile will rule you in secret. It will hijack your thoughts, sabotage your relationships, twist your dreams. Not because it wants to destroy you, but because it wants to be seen. Integration does not mean acting out your shadow. It means honoring it, listening to it, understanding its purpose. Rage is not the enemy. It is the voice of violated boundaries. Sadness is not weakness. It is love with nowhere to go. Fear is not failure. It is the protector you met too young. When you stop judging the shadow, you begin to hear its wisdom. And beyond the shadow, deeper still, you encounter the inner figures Jung named as the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine energies within the psyche. The anima is the soul of man, the creative, emotional, intuitive depth that the persona often dismisses as weakness. The animus is the spirit of woman and the rational, focused, assertive force often demonized or distorted by cultural expectation. These archetypal energies, when repressed, become tyrants, but when embraced, they become guides. The anima reconnects you to feeling, to dream, to soul. The animus brings direction, clarity, and courage together. They form the bridge to the self. They are not roles. They are movements of being. And when harmonized, they birth something greater than duality. They birth wholeness. And wholeness is not perfection. It is sacred tension. It is living with contradiction without needing to resolve it. It is being strong and vulnerable, wild and wise, joyful and grieving without apology. The self is not neat. It is not marketable. It is not easy to digest, but it is true. And truth, once tasted, makes all substitutes bitter. Once you begin to live from the self, the persona becomes too small. You cannot go back to pretending, not because it is wrong, but because it is dead. The soul cannot breathe in a coffin of image. It demands space, depth, mystery. It demands that you live your own life, not the one that earns you praise. This is the great confrontation, persona versus self. One seeks approval, the other seeks truth. One adapts, the other transforms. One is admired, the other is known. And the world may not celebrate yourself. It may resist your awakening. It may prefer your mask. But your soul does not exist to be palatable. It exists to be whole. And wholeness is the rebellion that heals the revolution, that ripples through every life you touch. When you stop living as the persona and begin to live from the self, you become a mirror. You show others what it means to be real. You become the wound that heals, the myth that breathes, the flame that reminds the forest it is still alive. So take off the mask, not in anger, but in reverence. It got you here. It kept you safe. But now it suffocates. Now it hides the very thing the world needs most, your unrepeatable soul. Strip it away. Let the wind touch your skin. Let your voice shake with truth. Let your life become a sacred unraveling. You are not here to impress. You are here to remember, to gather every lost piece and bring it back into the light, to stand naked and whole before the mystery and finally say, I am not who you wanted me to be. I am who I am.